The one thing I like about numbers is, whether it's green speed, what have you, if you're not measuring, when you get into that situation where you have a member or a customer or whatever that had a bad day, the greens are terrible, they're slow and everything. Well, if you're not measuring, it's a he said, she said type of situation where at least if you have data, you can have a conversation.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Well, I am super excited here to bring actually somebody, an interesting story. For those that went to Penn State, one of the great, traditions of Penn State's turf program is the annual turf conference. And every year it's typically led off by Mr. Darin Bevard and his sidekick, meteorologist, that they do kind of the State of the Union, State of the Year, Herb Stevens. And it's one of those traditions that is just like, as a Penn State student, an alum, and you come to that conference, it's always kicked off by that session. And I've known Darin as a young up and coming whippersnapper, intern, assistant at Sunnybrook, seen him at many tournaments and championships. Let me rephrase that, championships. And it's just really cool to have Darin Bevard here, joining the podcast today as he is prepping, just in lieu of just in travel on the east end of Long Island for the US Open. So I appreciate you jumping in.
Appreciate being invited, Tyler. And, that Penn State tradition, sometimes I do it with Herb Stevens from Grassroots Weather, but, going way back to when I was a student at Penn State in the early 90s, Stanley Zontek used to kick off the conference with that year in review type of talk. So it's kind of a USGA Penn State tradition, and I'm glad to say that that Penn State has a strong USGA connection. So and I'm proud to be part of that.
Well, for those that don't know a little bit about your career, why don't you try to? I know it's like, let's give us the Cliff Notes version of that, because you've had a really incredible career and how you got to the role that you're in today.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I won't say that I've been lucky, but I have been fortunate. I've worked at it. I went to Penn State. I got my bachelor's and master's. Came out. I was an assistant superintendent on the Eastern Shore of Maryland at Talbot Country Club for 3 years, working for Guy Ostrander, who I still consider one of my mentors for sure. And when I was there, Stan Zontek was a consulting agronomist and said, "Would you ever think about coming to work for the USGA?" And the first time I said no, because I thought I was rich, making, $32,000 a year. And I was fishing all the time, and it was a pretty good life. But the second time they came calling, Tom Watzke, who was my advisor, I said no, and he called me, and I won't use the colorful language but basically said, you need to wake up and realize you're wasting your talents a little bit and maybe try something different. And so I did. And basically December 30th of 1996, I started with the USGA and in the Mid-Atlantic region, and I've been there ever since. I'm in my 30th year. I've been a consulting agronomist. I've been director of the Mid-Atlantic region. And since May of 2014, I've been the senior director at Championship Agronomy. So I've gotten to do some different things, met a lot of great people, worked with a lot of great people, but that's the Cliff Notes version of how I got to today, anyhow.
Yeah. All right. So there's a place in St. Michael's. It's been years since I've been to St. Michael's, but there's this little crab shack. You go through town, you pass like Links at Perry Cabins on your right. You go down maybe another mile or two, and it's on the left-hand side. looks like a little hole in the wall place, but I'll tell you what, they've got some of the best crabs in America. You probably know what it is, but
Chesapeake Landing.
that is
It's
it.
called Chesapeake Landing. Yeah, we one of our favorite places to go. That's Chesapeake Landing's kind of one of those where the locals go restaurants. But yeah, that's where you're talking about, and it's a really good spot. So
Yes. So anybody that's never been to that part of the country, I really recommend. It's a beautiful spot to vacation. And it's not super busy like some beach towns. It's busy enough. But it's not like Rehoboth Beach, Ocean City, Maryland, things of that nature.
no, it's a nice pace. It's a nice pace there. My father has a place just outside of St. Michael, so I get there still quite often. And yeah, we enjoy it a lot. We take every opportunity that we can to get down there. So it's a good spot.
You've seen, I think it's always interesting. Every now and then I'll see different job advertisements from the USGA, different types of positions. And when the agronomy roles come open, I'm always fascinated of just seeing like, what is the day in the life like as a USGA agronomist? And I'm sure that has evolved, over time of what that role is, what it does, and what a day in the life is. But I'd love to hear from your viewpoint. And I'm sure your role has even evolved, and what it is today comparative to, when you started.
Yeah. Well, I think the most interesting thing about how the role has evolved is just technology. And I remember it used to be, when you do a consulting report, back when I started, it was just words on a page. And then, you started to come out with, the old Kodak DC-60, and we could insert pictures in the reports, but, the quality of the pictures, it's like, yeah, okay, I guess I see what you're talking about. And, now you do a report, one of our guys, you're going to have, 4 or 5 pictures in it, which is great because the picture says 1,000 word thing, especially works really well with agronomy to be able to show people what you're talking about and making it more understandable. But as far as the agronomist role, if it's a consulting agronomist, it's 1 or 2 half-day visits a day or a full-day visit. You go, you visit a golf course, you spend 3 or 4 hours with the superintendent, with the green committee or owners, depending on what kind of club it is. You finish there, and a lot of times at 1 o'clock you go and do another one. And then the rest of your time, especially in the summer season, is spent dictating and editing reports and putting pictures in to get that work done. And you got to keep up because there's always going to, if you don't do it the day of, tomorrow you may have 1 or 2 more. So all of a sudden you're 3 behind. So, but in the off season, the quote unquote off season, you do a lot of conferences and speaking, and you also just take some time for yourself. But I always talk about the fact that when I started with the USGA in basically 1997, if you went to a golf course and they were mowing at 1/8 of an inch, it was like, oh my God, you are at 1/8 of an inch? That's insane. Now 1/8 of an inch is kind of what everybody does. And you go to, some of the higher end facilities, I mean, they're at 0.090. A tenth of an inch is very common mowing height. So, and that's one, as a profession, the superintendents, all of us are better because we've learned, and there's a lot of tools and stuff that we have that we didn't have 30 years ago. But the other is the equipment involved with the flex mowers and just the different things that you can do to, whether it's greens or fairways. If you would have said, when I was doing the business, there's a thing, you'll attach it to a fairway mower and it'll tell you where you need to water or where there's stress and that type of stuff. It'd be like, come on, really? I mean, because, back then we barely had cell phones. We certainly didn't have smartphones. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest change is just all of the technology. And while in some respects, the technology, certainly makes our jobs better, I'm not sure it always makes it easier.
It's a great question. I'll tell you on the search side of things and recruiting processes, I hear this question all the time from search committees, GMs of, how do you evaluate the use of technology? What are you seeing with superintendents and clubs? And it's always like, well, it depends. I mean, there's people that I know that still use a knife to check soil moisture. And you know what? Those are some pretty good conditions. And they're not using a TDR or the USGA's tool as well. Right.
Yeah.
So it really depends on that superintendent. There's 100 ways to do it, but I do feel, whether it's the autonomous mowers, whether it's the Deacon, it is absolutely something that more and more facilities are adopting, which I think this is my viewpoint, not anybody else's opinion. I think it's great if it's used in the right manner and it's communicated what you're actually getting, because I think it's a great communication tool for superintendents, not to justify, but sometimes have to justify what they're doing because most of the members are just uneducated and don't know what's going on their property. Do you
Yeah, I 100% agree. I still believe that there is a great amount of art to taking care of a golf course and greenkeeping. The one thing I like about numbers is, whether it's green speed, what have you, if you're not measuring, when you get into that situation where you have a member or a customer or whatever that had a bad day, oh, the greens are terrible, they're slow and everything. Well, if you're not measuring, it's a he said, she said type of situation where at least if you have data, you can have a conversation and, yeah, we had rain last night and we put down a spray this morning. The greens were slow. Hey, look, they're the same as they were yesterday when we started the day. But if you don't have numbers, you're kind of at the whim of someone's opinions. But I definitely, I see situations where people become obsessed with numbers, almost you can't see the forest for the trees type of stuff. So I believe there is a balance between collecting the data and then using feel, for lack of a better term, to interpret that data and still do the things that it's like, I know the numbers say this, but that's not what I'm seeing in the field. We need to do this. We need to react, um, you know, to something that you're seeing in the field, even if the numbers may not support that. So again, it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. But again, having numbers, I think is, I think it's a good thing. You talk about, guys who are really good at putting a knife in the ground. And I still see some of those folks too, but I will tell you that, you know, even going back to when I was still on the golf course, you used the 1/4-inch soil probe, you took the plug out and you would feel it and say, this feels good. We got good moisture. Oh, this is dry or whatever. Well, me and Guy, Ostrander at the time, the feel may be different. The nice thing about numbers is they help make everybody doing the same thing a little bit. So again, there's anybody that thinks there's only one way to do this is not going to last very long. That's all I'm going to say.
My one of my dear friends, he's a business coach. He comes from the finance corporate world, and he always has this saying about numbers don't lie, people do. And I think about that same thing in this kind of context. Now, people could inflate numbers, but typically those numbers now don't lie when you can pull it from your phone and see, hey, here's what that measured. And it's an immediate response. When this is a question.
But just to wrap that up, the one thing that, I get with like green speed, it's like, I don't measure, it's like, if you're not lying about it or anything, what do you have to hide? As long as you're honest and have an honest conversation, that's what I've, always, been like, are you not telling the truth or what's the problem? Because, numbers can lie and people can lie. So it's, anyway.
One thing that I'm fascinated with, and again, I have a different perspective than, being in the seat of the superintendent day to day. So, and it's been an evolved perspective, but now dealing more with directly with the golfer, dealing directly with, the GM stakeholders. It's a very interesting perspective. And I'm kind of curious, have you seen an evolution of the golfer over the years and how you consult or USGA agronomists consult with the golfer? Because my experience right now is they have access to a lot of information, and sometimes that information is coming from the wrong source. So it's a different engagement with those people. Cause it just seems there's more interest in the game and there's more interest into what superintendents are doing in their golf courses.
Um, in some respects it's changed, but in a lot of respects it hasn't. I mean, there's certain there's people that you can talk to about until you're blue in the face and they believe what they believe and you're not going to change that. And that's been the case, ever since, started consulting. I remember, man, I was young, just my 3 years in, and a golf course over on the shore, Ocean City area that I visited with, they had a couple fairways that were like caves, and they were, they had bad soil, poor growing environment. And I remember the owner of the club coming out and saying, he goes, I want to know why there's not good grass on these fairways, and I don't want to hear about soils or shade. And I told him I said, well, I may as well end the conversation right here then, because those are the two biggest factors in the problems that you have. So I think there's a lot more access to information, and I think that's helped in some respects, because what I will say is that you get a lot less of, well, I was over here and they're doing this and their greens are this fast and everything. There's less course to course comparison and a greater understanding that, what, we're not Marion or we're not Oakmont, that type of stuff. I believe there's a greater understanding than maybe, what there was when I started in the consulting role and 30 years ago.
This again, I'm bringing this question to you because I hear it a lot, and one of them that I consistently hear from members or search committees is, how do you leverage consultants? How do you leverage the USGA? How should we best be doing that? And I'd love to hear that from your viewpoint, of how you feel facility superintendents, club officials, whomever, get the most out of working with, the USGA.
So, well, when I do visits, and they vary, what type, I like when the green chairman or the club president or some committee members are along, because it provides an opportunity to speak with them directly in the field, the things we're looking at, the problems that they're having. What I always hated was oh, well, you're only saying what the superintendent wants you to say. And it's like, well, no, the superintendent was the only one on the visit. I only got one point of view of what was going on. So having different points of view and different contributors is helpful. But it's also a willingness to be honest about the golf course. What are the problems? And, again, going back to my comment about, I don't want to hear about soils or shade. Well, there are realities in growing grass. And, the other, perspective I have is you get a lot of, well, you're just saying what he said. And it's like, well, no, we're two trained professionals. We are experts. And it's something that, we agree on that's correct, or, and I've always thought about, like, when you go to a doctor and a doctor's like, if you want to get a second opinion, go get a second opinion. And you go to another doctor and they tell you the same thing, hey, you're going to have to have shoulder surgery. They never say, oh, you're just saying what that guy said. They go and have shoulder surgery. So I think that there's a sense of, again, getting back to the information that people, a lot of people have lawns and everything else, that there's a sense that, what you're doing is not that much different than what I do, when in fact it's highly technical. But I would say that, when I come to a visit and the superintendent says, well, what do you want to talk about? That's not going to be productive. There should be a list of items of, things to talk about. It should be me saying, what do you want to talk about? I want to talk about POA control. I want to talk about the trees around 3 Green. You know, our irrigation system is 40 years old, and those type of things, to have an agenda to work from. And also to have these are the things my members, my customers or whatever aren't happy with. I'm sure you remember Steve Potter at Woodholm. I mean, it was great because he sent me the list of things, the committee the list of things and everything, and said, here's what we're going to discuss. And if anybody has anything they want to add, please add it. And we always had very, productive tours around Woodholm Golf Course, despite of the fact that I visited there a lot of years and was very familiar with it. It never got stale. So I think it's important to, important to decide, why are you inviting a consultant in? And that if you have the answer to that question, you're in pretty good shape.
So I was getting a chuckle as you were starting that. I asked my wife for some advice, and she said, well, why don't you go to the nutritionist and see what they say and get a second opinion? And unfortunately, that second opinion was the same thing my wife said. So I was laughing as you were saying that scenario, because I deal with that on a routine basis in a positive way. I should just listen to my wife. She's right all the time.
Yeah, well, that's, believe me, I know that. And it doesn't matter if she's right or wrong, she's right. So
right.
it just, but yeah, I've had that happen a few times myself, Tyler. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's, again, you run into that throughout, whether it's career dealings, marriage dealings, or whatever, that, sometimes somebody validates, something that you may not agree with or whatever. And well, by God, you maybe you should react and do what they're telling you to do.
One of the cool things that I've really appreciated watching with the USGA is the Greenskeeper apprenticeship program. I mean, that has got to be one of the most rewarding things, I think, for anybody there. And what you've done, and amongst many other accomplishments over the last 10 years, but just kind of your perspective of what you're seeing trends in the industry, as it relates to labor, and then obviously the solution here with the Greenskeeper apprenticeship program.
Yeah, I think that you have a few of those type of things going on in the business. Obviously, the Greenskeeper apprentice program that the USGA supports, and we've also got some other supporters in that journey. But having a situation to be able to take people that are already on the golf course, they may not have the opportunity or the ability to go to school to get a certificate, to have a way for them to be able to get the technical background information and those type of things while they are working. I think it's great. And I mean, if you look at the number of people that have gone through the different cohorts in the program, that have, stayed where they're at, they've been promoted, pay raises, still in the business. It's a very successful program. But you have industry programs like the Super Scratch, where again, that's about creating a pipeline of assistance, spray techs, whatever it is, by supporting financially. So the Greenkeeper Apprentice program is free. So it's not, and that's what the Super Scratch aims to do. So there's a lot of interest in this industry right now. Obviously, golf is booming in a lot of ways. You and I have seen the ebbs and flows over the years. We've been doing it long enough. But it's very satisfying to be a part of something like that supports the industry, but also helps folks young and old to, have a career and better themselves.
I think the one thing that I have found on this side of it, and again, I was fortunate to have some really good mentors, people who spent way too much time trying to keep me organized and try to keep me on the right path. And they did a great job. But I think the one thing that I found with these apprenticeship programs outside of what you just described is actually it keeps the mentor focused on teaching and training and keeps them sort of fresh on a lot of the basics. Because I think sometimes I mean, I can speak at least for myself, as the longer you're in the career, sometimes you may lose sight of some of those fundamentals. And a lot of times I find that most clubs that we've worked with, they're talking about fundamentals. They're not talking about big grass loss, big issues. They're talking about small little attention to detail. So I find that those apprenticeship programs as a sort of a secondary benefit, it keeps the employer and the hiring manager and the assistants engaged because they've got to train the trainee and keeps them kind of locked in with that. I don't know if you've seen that sort of same, result or method.
Well, I mean, I think that one of if you look at in terms of just the superintendents, the great ones, hire people and mentor them and also allow those people to help keep them fresh. They don't get bored. They don't get complacent. And a lot of times that has to do with that pipeline of young talent that comes in. So again, the apprenticeship program is one of those things that, makes you realize the things, I think, as you say, the fundamentals, and both in agronomy, customer relations, employee relations, those type of things that you can just get bored with and forget how important they are, and realize that nothing good happens without them. So,
When you think of sort of the future of the industry, anything that, concerns you, anything that you say, hey, I'm really looking forward to this, I'm excited about this, anything like that stand out to you right now?
well, I'm really excited about autonomous mower technology. It keeps improving and getting better. I mean, you look at what GPS sprayers did for, a lot of places in terms of, just accurate sprays, less problem with, overlaps into places where you didn't want to spray something, for getting reduction in the amount of product that's used, which is beneficial, financially and environmentally in some respects. I just think autonomous mowing is going to be something that, um, becomes more and more part of the business. Um, I'm excited to see, some of our turf programs kind of making a comeback in numbers and that type of stuff as, this, improvement in the golf industry as a whole, has taken place since COVID. Um, so yeah, I mean, so the numbers of some of these programs were really dwindling. And I think it was a situation where, look, I came in at a good time. I came in during a boom. And by 10 years later, things were pretty saturated. You had more people looking for jobs than there were good jobs. And then the financial crisis hit, and that just got worse. And so people steered away from the industry in some respects because, for better for worse, the prospects weren't great at that time. I'm excited about the young people that are coming in. I'm excited about the diversity of the people that are coming in. We're a male dominated industry, but you have the women in turf starting to get attention and seeing more and more females. You see, it's cool to see a lot of our, Latino workers and stuff that came in as a crew member or whatever. They're getting, going to a Rutgers short course or something like that. So I just, I'm excited for the future, being positive, and in some respects, I'm excited about it looking different than the past. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been something that we've enjoyed watching too. One of our we did a scholarship program or started a scholarship program, and our first place winner was a female. She actually is a career changer. She went to school for something totally different, played sports played softball at the University of Syracuse, and now she works at Waynesboro Country Club, in your backyard, not too far from you.
Yeah,
So.
not too far from me. So
Last section here I wanted to cover is you got a busy week next week, Shinnecock Hills, U.S. Open, William Flynn property, which I'm a diehard William Flynn guy, and just kind of talk through what you're seeing, what that week's like for you, what people should expect.
well, first of all, I'll say that John Jennings and his team have the golf course prepped and ready to go. I mean, as we say, it's ready to be ready. Um, greens are great. The speeds are very close to where we want them to be. So it's just now fine tuning, looking at the weather forecast, um, and, waiting, the probably one of the most exciting days is when all the volunteers arrive on site on Sunday, and you get to see a lot of old friends. And, so there's kind of an ebb and flow to the week where, I've been here since Tuesday. And, we're getting rolling. I've got Elliot Dowling, Brian Gitko on our team along, with me and support. But, you get kind of, okay, it's Saturday, I've been here for 5 days, and the volunteers arrive, and that's exciting, get to see everybody. And then Monday, the practice rounds, it's like exciting because, okay, we can watch them play golf, see what's going on out there. But by Wednesday, you're like, oh gosh, it's what's going on. And then Thursday, they start keeping score. Friday, you make the cut. So there's a really good progression of things to keep you excited. But no, our focus is, certainly on overall course conditioning, but it's, mainly on putting greens, speed and firmness, water management, turf health, those type of things. So, looking at a weather forecast that, right now has the potential for, you know, 14 to 18 mile an hour winds on Thursday, gusting into the mid 20s, 20 to 25 on Friday, gusting into the 30s. So we're already talking about what adjustments we could make because, going to have to slow the greens down a little bit, make sure that the golf course, from a firmness standpoint, stays playable. I mean, right now, the last time I looked out the window, if you've seen me glance at my phone, I'm not, like inattentive looking at a message. I'm looking at the radar for this line of storms that's headed at us like right now. So again, you're just, every day you start at 4:00 in the morning, starting on Monday, you go out and collect data, firmness and speed, work with everything from bunker raking to placement of rakes, all of those little details that, fortunately, those are the things that we're worried about right now at Shinnecock because there's nothing big to worry about. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's daily preparation of a golf course on steroids. You have, we'll have with volunteers and staff close to 200 bodies out there, and it seems like a lot, and it is a lot until you have, Friday at Oakmont or Sunday at Oakmont, and it seems like it's not enough. When you have to squeegee or fix bunkers or whatever you have to do. So, it's a great experience. So it's great working with the superintendent and developing those relationships. That's probably my favorite part of it is the friends that you make along the way. You go through one of these together. When you come out the other side, it's a bonding experience to say the least.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was fun last year being at Oakmont. I feel like I was a part timer. I wasn't there all week, so I was a part timer. But it was just awesome to be in that environment with people from all over the world, talking to just all committed to one common goal. And you're kind of hands on deck for whatever's needed, whether it's push mow and fly mow and rough, whether it's divots, whatever is needed. So I think, I always find for professionals that are coming up, if you've never volunteered at any sort of level of tournament championship, it's a great experience to see turf at the highest level, to meet so many different people, and friendships that you have forever. I mean, some of my closest friends have all come from volunteering at tournaments and whatnot. So I just think even that as a professional, there's a level of motivation too. When you go there, your kind of juices are flowing, saying, man, we need to get our crap together. Not that we're hosting a US Open next week, but sort of reinvigorates you about just the career.
Yeah, I agree. And the networking part of it, I think, is really important for young people. You do make friendships, for sure, that will last a lifetime, but the networking aspect of it, I'm an intern from here, oh, well, next year, we've got an internship program. Maybe you should apply here, or, what have you, or when do you graduate? We're going to be looking for an assistant, or, there's just so many opportunities to meet people, seeing what learning what it takes to manage at the highest level. You talk about being at Oakmont, you know, there's a few golf courses in this country that, if something happened and you had to, host a US Open at an alternate site at the drop of a hat, forgetting the circus outside the ropes, inside the ropes, Oakmont is a place that on a daily basis is really close to US Open conditions. Give them a week to grow the rough, maybe a couple extra cuts and stuff on greens, because in spite of what people say, they are not faster every day than what we have them at the US Open. But,
You're on record.
to see that, just what goes into some place like that, and to really arrive on site and be like, damn, this place is perfect. It's pretty cool. And to watch somebody like a John Jennings or Mike McCormick or, whoever it is, a Chad Mark at the Memorial, just how they conduct themselves, whether the weather's good, bad, indifferent, that everything is a process. Yes, you have to react to the weather, but you've already put the protocols in place to do so. And I think that's the biggest, thing a lot of times, is the processes. So
Last question for you. What does the average person not know or wouldn't know that goes on during the US Open?
Oh, let me think. Well, I most people probably don't know the amount of effort that we put into working with the course setup team and the course setup team with us to get things dialed in, for lack of a better term. We use shot link data, to look at how the golf course is playing, to make adjustments. Hey, well, we thought that, we had the third green receptive enough, but every ball that hits it is just hitting and running it to the back. We don't just keep, making the golf course firmer and faster and firmer and faster. It's an incremental progression. And sometimes we do, have to say, okay, we're good right here. And let's just try to sustain it. But no decision is made in a vacuum. You've got the club is involved. Our course setup team is involved. The agronomists are involved. We have a player services team that solicits feedback from players and caddies. Learning to separate the self-serving comments from the ones that are genuinely constructive. So I just think that there's an awful lot of collaboration that goes into the final setup that you see or will see on Thursday morning. So
I was just thinking, what is the wildest comment you've ever heard from a caddy? As you're saying, people can volunteer, their comments on that. What is the wildest thing you've ever heard from a caddy?
Well, I don't know how wild it is, and I'll keep names out of it, but had a caddy of a very well-known player. We were stimping greens, and he was, saying, well, I don't know why you're stimping there. It's uphill. And I'm like, actually, that's the downhill direction. And they're like, no, it's not. I said, well, watch. And, stimped it. He watched me stimp it, measure it, and what'd you get? It's like, 13.2. So, wow, son of a gun. I can't believe that was, downhill. And his player comes walking over. He had been chipping off the side of the green, and he came over and he's like, what are they rolling? And I was like, just measure that as 13.2. And he's like, oh, that's BS. He says, they're not that fast. And I'm like, 2 minutes ago, your guy couldn't even tell me whether I was rolling the ball uphill or downhill, and you're going to tell me that my speed is wrong. I said, I'm going to think my number is right. And I guess another good one that at one event had one player, not a caddy, but a player, come up and say, basically the greens on the golf course are way faster than the putting green, the practice putting greens. It's like, well, we've got, they're pretty similar. And so, okay, so the next day, a different player comes up, and at the time, John Bodenhammer, our chief championship officer, is like, hey, I want you to talk to such and such. And he's like, I just need to let you know that the practice greens are way faster than the greens on the golf course. And I'm like, that's funny, because yesterday I was told the exact opposite. And I said, our numbers say they're pretty similar. I said, so I'm going to stick with our numbers before we make any changes. So look, the PGA Tour player, they are elite and they are so talented, and we have so much respect for them. But sometimes they have their beliefs that aren't going to be changed as well, and that's okay. So, it's you never know what you're going to hear. That's all.
Yeah, that's for certain. I've not had that level of exposure and consistency of it, but I've heard some doozies over the years in my own arena. Last little note here, I wanted to commend you as well. Something that maybe people don't know about, Darin, is that you also have two individuals in your family that are currently in the industry as well, and I know that's a real proud source for you. And didn't know if you wanted to talk about that at all.
Yeah, I tell you, it is a very much a source of pride. I'll start with, Justin DePippo, who's my oldest stepson and is the director of golf course and grounds, or whatever his fancy title is, out at Bel Air Country Club. He's actually hosting the Curtis Cup this week. So you can see Bel Air on TV, in prime time, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with it being a West Coast event. But, he keeps that golf course in amazing condition. I don't have to, I don't even have to be biased. Everyone else says how great of work that he does. But, to think that, maybe had a little bit of influence on his career and that type of stuff was pretty rewarding. And also my daughter, who is 21 years old, is interning at Marion as we speak. And again, to have her want to participate in the same industry that I'm in is pretty cool. I don't know where that goes or whatever, but just for the experiences that she's already had at, Concord Country Club with Greg D'Antonio, and then Wilmington Country Club with John Urbanski, and now Marion with, Paul Latshaw, Paul B., Alex, and a really old friend of mine on the West Course, Charlie Carr. It's pretty cool. I appreciate you mentioned that, because it's a great thing. And by the way, people talk about, it's this industry. I tell my daughter every day how great it is, because it is a great industry to be a part of. It's, there's ups and downs. I don't care what your job is.
Yep.
Taylor Swift probably has bad days, but, you get to meet a lot of awesome people, and you get to be outside in some pretty great environments. So yeah, it's a great industry, and I'm proud to, there's 3 of us now. So legacy.
Yes. Well, it's funny you said that about Justin, because there was I'll have to find it. I just saw it on Twitter. It was a big golf account, and they were there at the event. And I think the comment was top 5 best presentation I've seen in my life. And this was coming from somebody pretty well traveled. It wasn't like, Joe Schmo who's got a burner account. It was a legitimate golf media account. So, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with me on this podcast, and best of luck next week. Look forward to seeing you at State College in the not too distant future.
So, yeah, well, Samantha will be back there in the fall, so I probably won't be too far behind. But anyhow, I appreciate the invitation and happy to do it anytime.
We'll make sure beers are on Charlie Conacher.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.